another week in DearPiggy's data structure tutorial. So in this week's videos, we've moved on to a new data structure to work on, and that is queues. So I never know how to say these right. It's either queues or queues. If you hear me say either one, that's basically what I mean. So basically, queues are an interface, and they're really similar to a stack, but at the same time, they're polar opposites. So I know that one's a little bit confusing, but just remember that the idea, as in the methods and the format, is similar to a stack. However, the order of the items are polar opposites. That always gets to me. Also, these queues follow a first in, first out rule, which, if you guys remember from last time, stacks followed a first in, last out rule. So right now I'm just trying to compare queues and stacks for you guys. I know we basically jumped right in, but our queues, whichever value goes in first, it's also going to come out first. But if you remember from our previous videos, the stacks, whichever value came in first was at the very bottom of our stack, and it also came out at the very last minute. Okay, so queues follow first in, first out, or FIFO, whatever you want to call it. And the real life example that I think of when we talk about queues are going to be waiting in line at the supermarket, or just waiting in line at anything, right? So a lot of us, lines, yes, are not always, you don't wait in line. I mean, I know sometimes I cut the line, but things like that at lunch or whatever. But how we think about queues is we just think about them as millions of robots, or not millions, however many robots that you want, waiting politely in a line one by one. And they're checking out at the supermarket. Each person has one item, and orderly, they check out and they leave the supermarket. Okay, so whichever robot was first got into line is also going to leave the supermarket first. Okay, so shopping, I guess, is a good way to think about it, right? Usually you don't cut people when you're shopping. Again, it's very possible to cut people in the lunch line, but you know, shopping's a better example, right? So now that we have a visual idea of what queues are, forgot to tell you what this video is basically going to be about, but we talked about the visual idea of a queue. We're going to talk about what classes our queue can implement, and then we're going to create a very simple queue, and that's it. So our first video is going to be quick and simple, and the next video is going to get a little bit more into the nitty-gritty details. Okay, so on to our queue implementation. So one thing that I did want to show you guys, and if I go to Replit and I pull up my stacks, so let me go ahead, and I don't know if I have my stacks. Review lesson 1. I bet that I'll have my stacks in it. All right, so for our stacks, whenever we were creating our stacks, does everyone see these are hash maps? Okay. Well, let's look at array list first and linked list. Linked list name is equal to new linked list. Array list is equal to new array list. Hash map is equal to new hash map. So everything that we've done so far has been creating a new instance of, well, essentially itself, right? So it could stand on its own. These things could work on its own. However, it's actually super different for a queue, because for a queue, queues are interfaces that cannot stand alone. So you absolutely must implement an instance of a class. Now, you could implement lots of different classes. Some examples, 3 examples that people most commonly use. 1 are linked lists. 2 is array DQ, 3 is priority queue. Now, how I like to think of these. So if you take a look at our picture really quickly, all of our queues, instead of saying Q1 is equal to new queue, or Q2 is equal to new queue, we say Q1 is equal to new linked list, Q2 is equal to new array DQ, and Q3 is equal to new priority queue. So you might be thinking, what are array DQ and priority queue, right? Because we had a video on a linked list a couple weeks before, and those we understand. It's basically like array lists, right? So however, array dequeues and priority queues are going to be classes in which we can implement our queues when we want to use those added pluses. So how I think about this is when we implement our linked list, we're implementing the very basics, right? So these are the basic things that you would need, but you do have extra perks that will come with when you use array dequeue or priority dequeue. So we haven't gotten far enough to talk about array dequeue or priority queue yet, but how I think of it is you could use any of the choices, any of the three choices, but if you need any of the extra or plus things that come with the array dequeue or priority queue, then use those. But if you don't need anything extra or fancy, stick with linked list. So that was a lot, but basically I just wanted to explain that while we will be implementing linked list, there are other choices. So now that we've talked about our implementations, we've got the boring stuff out of the way, we visually have painted a picture, we talked about what we can implement, the next part is going to be talking about creating a simple queue. So let's go ahead, put our code into action and write a really simple queue, okay? So queues, guys, actually are not as hard as they look. My website froze, obviously, of course. So we're gonna go ahead and look at the PowerPoint version. So creating a simple queue. This is exactly what it's gonna look like. Now, if we look at it, well, there's not too much to it, right? We just create it and then we add things to it. And so a couple of things that I wanted to mention is that we do actually have to import queue and whatever implementation we want to use. So in this case, I would have to import java.util.queue and java.util.linklist. Now remember last class that we learned to combine everything together, get everything in the util package, we just say java.util.star. So that'll cover everything, all of our grounds. So now that we've created our queue, we have currently a queue. So we have a supermarket that's just opened, but it's empty. There's no one in the supermarket. So we need to get people to go into the supermarket. So that's when we start adding things to our queue. So let's go ahead and do that. I feel like my reference to the supermarket was a little bit too sudden, so that may have not made as much sense, but hopefully what you understood by that is like an empty queue is like an empty supermarket. There's no one in line yet. Okay, so let's create a Java REPL. And the first thing I'm going to do before I forget is to go ahead and import my utility class. Import java.util.star, not and star. There we go. So the next thing I'm going to do is create a new queue. So queue, and then, oh, one thing I forgot to mention are our data types. So queues, like most other lists and stacks, have some sort of data type. Now they could be your own created class or object, or it could just be something simple like string, integer, boolean, etc. Right? So we're going to stick with string, but that also means that everything in our queue must be strings. We cannot have different things. Queue string. Let's call it, what is something that, I bet everyone has heard of Walmart, right? I prefer Costco over Walmart, but not everybody goes to Costco. Queue string Walmart is equal to new, but we're not saying new queue. We're saying new linked list. And then we're saying string, and then we're doing the, what are they called? Parentheses, and then we're putting our semicolon. So we've created a queue and its name is Walmart. So now we need to go ahead and start adding things to Walmart. Honestly, guys, I do have to say I was not paid by Walmart or Costco to say this, but Costco is really the best. That place, they require you a membership card to go in, but once you get in there, there's like samples and there's all this cool stuff and it's just amazing. I even had this whole plan in my head that when I was little, if I ever decided to run away from home, my plan would to be like sneak in with some other family and sneak into Costco, and just live my entire life off of their samples. Doesn't that sound like a good life? Okay, so notice that I'm creating these functions right now that are going to be adding things to Walmart. So how I want to think about this, And I guess real world applications is everyone comes into Walmart and they have one item that they're going to take to check out. Now, the first one that came in was an old lady who's buying something for her family reunion. I don't know where I made that up from. So she came into the supermarket first. She grabbed one item. What did she grab? So if you're going to go to a family reunion, I've never been to one actually, but I would say she maybe bought like champagne. Do people drink champagne at family reunions? Let's say yes. So she grabbed her champagne and she is first in line in the queue. In the queue, guys, also means line, waiting, right? So then the next person that comes in is a little girl with her mom, and she buys a bag of M&Ms, right? Because she was a good girl today, and they also get in line. Now, the third person to come into Walmart went and grabbed some homemade, not homemade, because Walmart is not homemade, just some chef special pasta, super specific. And then he goes ahead and stands in line. So the last person to come in is just some college student who grabs a cup of coffee from the Starbucks inside the Walmart and then books it out of there, but he has to wait in line. So we have our queue ready. We have champagne, M&Ms, pasta, and coffee. And so all of these people have lined up in line. And so when we print out our queue, we can just simply print out like this. We will learn how to print out all the items separate in the next video by using Iterator, but we could also just print it out. So guys, we created a simple basic queue. Right now, we're just going to talk really quickly about the order of our items and we will be done. So since we talked about first in, first out for our queue, that means that the lady with the champagne gets in line first, she's in the queue first, and she also leaves first. So that means that if I were to take away an item at the top of our queue, I would be taking away champagne. Remember in stacks, when I took away an item at the top of my stacks, it would have been coffee, but since we're working with queues, it would have been champagne. So whatever order that you added them is the same order that you would take it out. Okay, so it's gonna go champagne, M&Ms, chef special pasta, and coffee. So there's no like special order here. Whatever comes in first gets out first. Okay, so is there anything else that I need to add for my queues, creating a simple queue? All of these are strings. Yes, we know that, and we used our add. Okay. Good, so that was a quick example. Next video, we're going to be talking about queue methods and the iterator. That is going to be a little bit harder, but should be pretty fun as well. Okay, so that is next video. I will see you guys then. Okay, bye guys.